Now, one commentator used animals to illustrate this passage, and I thought some of you would just enjoy this. So here you go. You ready? If you've never been able to remember something from a sermon, here's your key. You ready for the 4 animals? Don't be, for the sake of this illustration, don't be wolves, turtles, chameleons, or pit bulls. I apologize to the dog lovers in the room, okay? Don't be. So don't be wolves, turtles, chameleons, or pit bulls. This comes from an actual scholarly man, okay? Dennis Johnson's commentary. So what does this mean? Well, in the illustration, he says, okay, if the culture or if persecution is sort of coming at the church, some Christians react like a cornered wolf, okay? And just this desire with no love in the heart, just out of kind of a fearful adrenaline rush, they just want to lash out and bite back. They just want to be hitting back as hard as possible with no grace, no gentleness ever at all, just biting back as hard as possible. And he says, we do not want to be wolves. A cornered wolf who doesn't know what to do and strikes out in some kind of anger or some kind of vengeance. We don't want to be believers who are angrily, in a mean-spirited way, fighting back. So that would be, he says here, to strive side by side. That would be bad striving, because it would be striving to the point of sin. It would be a sinful kind of offense. Number 2, we got the turtles. You know where I'm going with the turtle, don't you? The turtle's like, I'm out. Hands go in, legs go in, head goes in. I'm not even here. Just I'm a rock, right? The turtle's gone. Where's the turtle? The turtle's gone. He said, some believers say the thought of any kind of conflict over worldviews makes me so uncomfortable that I am going to just vaporize. I'm going to disappear. My hands and feet are gone. My head is gone. I'm a rock. Don't look at me, okay? So some Christians say striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, that does not sound like an enjoyable life at all. Striving just sounds in general not pleasant. So I don't want to be engaged in any kind of worldview issue. I don't want to ever do apologetics. I don't want to have to kind of defend the gospel or explain why I believe what I believe, or ever get into even a friendly debate with someone who doesn't agree. So one temptation is to just hide away and be turtles, this would be bad defense. He says we need to instead, in verse 27, in the middle, we need to stand firm in one spirit with one mind. Now, do you see the offense and defense here? Stand firm is defensive. Like, I'm not going to budge on the truth. But I'm going to be totally gracious to you, but I'm not going to budge on the truths of the gospel. I'm going to stand firm. You think 1 Corinthians 16? Act like men, stand firm. That's a pretty intense, politically incorrect verse from the Bible right there, ladies and gentlemen. Act like men, stand firm. 1 Corinthians 16. And so Paul says, no, there is a kind of defensive posture. Offense, defense, you know me in sports, doesn't go well. Okay, so there is a kind of defensive posture where when people come to criticize with grace and kindness, we do not budge on the truths of the Christian faith. It is not, by the way, it is not loving to change the Bible to please others. It feels loving to some degree, but it is a false pseudo-love that harms and destroys people on the other side. So we are not going to edit the Bible to try to please the culture or to please others. We are going to stand firm in the truth. We're going to act like men. We're going to stand firm. We're not going to budge on that. And you'll see Paul mention that phrase throughout his letters. But also, we're going to strive side by side, which means we're not going to hide like turtles. And then what's the other one? Chameleons. Now, I know this is a bit of a misnomer. There's debate because people say chameleons don't actually blend into their surroundings, but just ignore the facts, okay, ladies and gentlemen? We're going to just use the legendary picture of a chameleon, the way we think of it, okay? At least the way it's pictured in the way we think. A chameleon, gets up against a green bush and suddenly it turns green. Or it's against some brown tree bark and it sort of turns more brown. It just sort of blends into its surroundings. And this is a little different from the turtle. The turtle just doesn't want to engage at all. The turtle just wants to disappear, okay? I've been there, I've felt that. But the other side, the chameleon just wants to do what? You know what? The chameleon doesn't want to just disengage. The chameleon wants to agree when the other side is saying something biblically untrue. And haven't we all felt the pressure? It just, in the company, maybe you're at work, and there's 6 coworkers, maybe it's a lunch break. I don't know where you might work, but let's say you're sitting around the table, it's a lunch break, and there's 6 coworkers, and they're talking about a current hot button issue. And it clearly, maybe it's about the sexual revolution or something, and you're going, oh no, Can someone change the subject? And it starts, and person A shares their view, and it's like, okay, that's not right. And then B and C, and it goes around the table, and then they turn to you and say, hey, what do you think about X over here? And you go, can I just turn into the color of the wall behind me? Can I just disappear? And there's going to be a temptation to say, I think that's pretty much what I think, right? I mean, just to straight up not say what Scripture says, to be a chameleon and to just look like the people you're around. So, I mean, to put it just really directly, when you are at work, you might look, sound, seem to think like your work friends, who maybe are maybe not biblically thinking, maybe. And then when you're at church, you sound like your church friends. And, there was kind of a joke growing up with youth group, where this would be the case, at school you're one way, at youth group you're another way, at church you're this way, with your parents you're this way. That's a chameleon. We just sort of adapt to our environment. We lick the finger, we find out where the wind is blowing, and then we make the same emphasis and the same way of speaking that the people around us want to make. And Paul says, no. Being loving does not equal agreeing with things people say that are not biblically accurate. We can be loving and gracious and still not agree with what is untrue. Paul says to speak the truth in love, right? To speak the truth in love. And the last one, the pit bulls. If you own pit bulls, I'm not mocking you right now, okay? But here's the pit bulls. He says, another thing that can happen when pressure comes from outside, persecution, things get interesting. One temptation is to turn on each other in the church. It's kind of like there's so much panic and anxiety about certain things that it can be possible to start wanting to compete and to be hostile within the church, and like pit bulls that turn on each other and begin biting and devouring one another. It can be divisive, and we can lose unity. And it appears that for the Philippians, the pit bull mentality was taking over. Because throughout this letter, Paul keeps saying, be unified, one mind, one spirit, strive side by side. And then at the end, he says, tell, Euodia and Syntyche, these two women in the church, to agree in the Lord, because they have strived side by side with me, he says. So clearly there was an element of disunity going on in the midst of the Philippians and their persecution.